All right, guys, chapter 16, working with adults. So, understand who is the adult, learn about the adult's psychosocial and developmental needs, describe early adulthood, stresses and challenges, and midlife changes. Fun, fun. So, who is the adult? When we talk about legal age and chronological age, a chronological age is the number of years a person has lived, especially when used as a standard against which to measure behavior or intelligence. This is sort of when you start to begin and assume that responsibility for yourself. You are buying your own house, you are moving out, you're doing things on your own. There's many different ways of describing or defining an adult. Levels of maturity exhibited by a person, either their responsibility, decisions that that person makes, controlling your emotional outbursts, which sometimes people do and sometimes they don't in their adulthood, certain developmental tasks, so your independence, long-term relationships, your occupation that you're sort of starting to stick with and not just those side jobs that you're having in high school. You're finding where you want to be. Your psychosocial or developmental needs. Maturity requires the acceptance of responsibility and the empathy for others. You're starting to be able to make these logical decisions and control your outbursts and accept social roles. What else do you think would define an adult to you? How would you define an adult? Okay, so the legal age is 18. Yes, we know, but how would you define an adult? Again, we're looking at your reputation, the high regard for welfare of others, that you're worried about other people instead of just on your own and finding your own self. You're looking at other people now. Respect, identity, and intimacy. There is nothing that certain defines a physical or psychomotor changes. So like in infants and toddlers, they're learning how to walk at this age, but there's nothing that's happening at the age of 25 because you've already gotten all your physical aspects. So we can't define it in that aspect. Your identity can be influenced by sexual orientation, race and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and education. And really, adulthood comes with all of its own challenges and largely unpredicted experiences. We haven't been through this before. You can predict how a 5-year-old will react to an illness better than a 30-year-old. It's more defined in concepts, your life choices, that empty nest kind of syndrome, retirement, grandparenting, return of adult children. These are all happening at this stage. What else do you think could be a concept in defining adulthood or respect identity, or what can influence it? So the development itself, age is defined as the sum of all the changes that normally occur in an organism with the pass of time. It doesn't even say human because other things can age. It's just how it's described. You'll have a young adult, middle adult. The young adult is typically seen as healthy and has some hidden hazards. That's between 21 and 40 years of age. The middle adult is between about 40 to 65. There is a concept of compressed morbidity, which you can find the definition of on page 298, but basically, gerontology, which is the study of social, cultural, psychological, cognitive, and biological aspects of aging, have said that compressed mobility suggests that people may live longer, healthier lives and have shorter periods of disability at the end of their lives. Which is an interesting concept, basically that we are enjoying more of ourselves later than we are earlier. I'm not really surprised. But think about when aging increases, so can your anxiety. And we start worrying about some of these age-related changes, either forgetfulness or bladder control or balance issues. We start kind of worrying about some of these things that are going to happen. Early adulthood, way early adulthood, 17 to about 24. really how we progress depends on what we've been through. And it's really influenced on other experiences that we've had previously. And that's a pretty natural thing to understand. But again, we are formed by our life is formed by how we live our life. What's happened to us will change each and every individual, and we need to understand that. A lot goes into defining an adult, and it's not just ages, it's everything else. Adulthood has also changed a little bit over the past few generations. There's a thing now that's a sandwich generation, which is people who care for their aging parents while supporting their own children. So it would be me taking care of my mom and dad while also taking care of my son, which can be hard. There's also unemployment, and gosh, with the unemployment right now with COVID-19 is unbelievable, the rate that people are on that. It wasn't typically something you saw before in previous generations. Again, life experiences changes how each adult kind of works through their own life. You know, if we've had family members die early on, that's going to change how my personality is a little later. But again, respect still is the hallmark of the effective interaction as we work our way through this lifespan. And each and every stage, and I know that I keep saying it, it sounds like a broken record, but we need to recognize that each individual is separate from other individuals, and we can't keep treating each person the same way. Psychosocial, developmental, and needs and actions. There is some responsibility. We start assuming responsibility for ourselves. Our maturity requires the acceptance of responsibility and empathy for others. If we think about maturity, the definition is the state, fact, or period of being mature. So then mature means fully developed, physically full grown. And we're in that process of sort of accepting where we're going. You start developing some of that empathy, so more regard for others, finding a way to support the next generation, or redirecting attention from yourself onto others. And then there's this self-respect, my reputation, my respect for myself and understanding my previous developmental stages. There are some social roles in adulthood that we are familiar with. This is sort of where you're finding your primary relationships. Almost always during this time, you're going to find that primary person, your spouse, companion, that you get to know, then start to have a life where you sort of weave your life together. You start eating together, sleeping together, and either living together, and usually this person is key during a stressful time. Sometimes they're not. Typically, this is the person who you would go to. Not all the time, but usually this is where that primary relationship comes out. You're finding parenting. People are starting to become pregnant, become parents themselves. You might start to care of older family members. So the average caregiver in the U.S. is a female and in their late 40s. And more than half of them are already employed. So if you can think of the term that we've talked about earlier, what would happen to them? Now think about that again. They are female, in their late 40s, and over half of those caregivers are still employed. That sounds like a recipe for a burnout. It's pretty nuts. And also you have some political and other service activities that are happening more in your adulthood as well. And then also your work. Again, your definition of work can be varied. There's no clear-cut definition on how to describe that, mostly because it's different for every person. It depends on your value system, what you expect to happen, any aspirations, your environment. The job title and position obviously are something that can define your work, or being a sense of someone. So we need to look past this work is when you go, get paid, come home. It's not always that, because there are people who volunteer for work. And that's just their value system, or that environment, or the position that they're in. It's work for them. So we have to understand that. Work-related responsibilities can be different between men and women. A lot of times, and I know this is going to bring up probably a touchy topic, but women, and it's talked about in the book, but the woman work, then they assume the work at home a lot of the times. They clean, they cook, they take care of the children. Again, times have changed, so I'm not saying that that's exactly how it was, but if we think about previous generations, that's what happened. There are two types of responsibilities associated with a work role. So one is to do one's job well, actually be able to go in, do the work that you have to do and do it correctly, and then fulfill the reasonable expectations of others. So my work expects me to be able to teach my students and place students on their affiliation, and I want to be able to fulfill that expectation of others, what they expect of me to do. There are work relationships that start to last longer than just your Applebee's job or your high school in and outs, but these are sort of those relationships that you're keeping longer times. I'm still friends with some people from my old work, and these relationships can be deep and pretty complex. And sometimes there is not a clear separation of the two between your personal life and your work life. And especially if you develop something like things like a carpool, you sometimes spend more time with your work people than your family. So stresses and challenges of adulthood. The definition of stress is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. We all have stresses. The more you take on, the more stress you're going to have. There is physical and emotional stress in a primary, I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. Your primary relationship can be stressful, either physically or emotionally. That could be stressful. There is parenting that can be stressful, stress and care of the elderly members, and work. Your parenting, there's no instruction manuals. There's nothing that says you need to discipline your 5-year-old who's freaking out that they can't go to the store this way. There's nothing that says, and that can be hard. Stress and care of elderly or family members who have sick, not only because your family members are sick, but that you are taking care of them. That can be really difficult. And work. Work itself is difficult. I like how the book does say about one of the highest stress jobs as an enlisted soldier, airport control, or medical ICU, which is interesting to understand. You do start having midlife changes, or if anyone has heard the midlife crisis, your biggest emotion at this time is doubt. And really, it's just determining why you're feeling the way you're feeling. Did I do everything I could in my life? Did I achieve or transition in my career? Do I have a family life? Health conditions? Am I doing the best that I can? Is this all that there is in my life? Sometimes you feel like something's missing, that you didn't do enough, or you didn't make any course changes for yourself. And it's really important that this is really a lot of who you will be treating. And sometimes you'll get these feelings coming out towards you, and don't take offense. So knowing your adult patient, a lot of them think that this should be their pain-free time of their life, which we all know doesn't always happen. But they may have a multitude of issues concurrently, so the older you get, the more things that happen. So for instance, my husband has a blood pressure issue now, and I have high cholesterol. I don't know if I do. I think that went down actually. But you have different issues that start appearing that you never had when you were 20, but now these are, or 16, and now they're starting to come back up, and these issues are starting to happen at the same time. They might feel depressed, vulnerable, trapped, mostly because they can't do things expected of them. If they're painful and they're in your clinic, they have to work, they have to take care of their family, they have to clean. These are all going to increase the stress and increase what's happening to them. Again, listening is key for them. They may not decrease their anxiety, but you can help make them adjustments in their life and help teach them how to move forward. So that is the end of this chapter. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to help. Thanks. Bye.